to introduce our next speaker, who is the managing partner of the Succession Fund and a partner with Argosy Partners, which is a merchant bank based here in Toronto. Our speaker is very well experienced in all matters of private equity, in ownership transition and succession. He spent many years with Canadian General Capital, where he was a managing partner as well. He spent his time on Bay Street, and he's a true subject matter expert. And today he's going to explore the issues that he has seen arise in transferring ownership of a business. And he's also going to share his belief that deliberate planning is truly a fundamental requirement. Strength through structure, I think I hear it again. So please join me in welcoming our speaker, Mr. Larry Klar of Argosy Partners Limited. Larry?
Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to begin by telling you a short story of my growing up in Montreal with our family business that was started by my grandfather when he came to Montreal in 1921, and it still exists today, owned by another group, but he started in 1921, a small company that manufactured brushes and brooms. And jump ahead to 1951, and my father's a young man at McGill, and my grandfather gets ill. My father has to leave McGill to go run the family business. He goes to hold it together. He never goes back to McGill, and grows the business to support his family, his employees, builds a nice small business that he works very hard at, more to support lifestyle than with any other thought, and is there for another 48 years until in 1998 or so, he gets ill and had to be away from the business for 5 or 6 months. That absence of 5 or 6 months almost undid 75 years of building in his 45 years there because of the absence of depth in the management team and the fact that he was the company. And that's, of course, the harmful definition of personal goodwill. And ultimately, the plant foreman and the salesperson held it together until he could come back. And with some capital improvement and some polish, we were able actually to sell that business to a relatively large customer, where there were some executives leaving, and they took it over and continue it to this day. But that experience of watching someone build something that defines them so greatly and worked at it, and it was such a noble undertaking to build it, to support your family off of it, but not attending to the basics of what am I going to do with it one day? It wasn't even a conversation that he wanted to have with us. We've heard about other people that have engaged their parents in that conversation. Maybe it had something to do with 3 children, everyone pursuing a different type of professional career. But it really gave me the sort of firsthand, right-in-your-face sense of what can happen and how quickly momentum can be stalled in a business, which of course equals the erosion of value and very potentially the inability of positioning it for sale one day. I'll use that as a segue to talk about, as a next point, one of our portfolio companies, a company called Westmount Storefront Systems in Kitchener, and its founder, Tim Mitchell, contacted us about 5 years ago. His accountant and lawyer actually contacted us about 5 years ago, and he did not have to do anything at all with respect to raising financing, taking on a new partner, exploring succession and ownership business transition issues. He didn't want to do anything for many years, and eventually realized that with so much of the family net worth tied up in the business, and with so much of a growing business reliant on him, that he needed to take some steps to protect and preserve family net worth, which was the driver, and ultimately that translates into mitigating risk and lessening exposure to that main illiquid asset. So we helped Tim Mitchell take chips off the table And he knew he was in for a new relationship, a new partnership, and it all came down to how we were going to help him slowly add depth to the management team, diversify the customer base, professionalize the internal controls of the business, bring some strategic planning and fiscal discipline, and get him as a founder-owner and a couple of the new people in the senior management team to augment the way they thought about the business, the way they ran the business, the way they allocated the two things that are scarce when you run a business, time and capital. And he was willing to do it with a partner. And it took a long time for him to embrace is too strong a word, for him to welcome us as his new business partner, forming a board of directors, realizing that decisions were not going to just be him getting up in the morning and saying, today I'm going to go left and I'm going to pursue this initiative. And that worked for 20-something years, and that's the majority of the foundation on which businesses are built, of course. But in his particular instance, he was willing to do a series of things that were absolutely brand new, absolutely scary, I would say, and eventually came to the conclusion that he did not want to be at his business alone anymore, making every decision by himself. And that's a pretty powerful and sophisticated thing for a founder, owner, operator to recognize is appropriate for the purposes of value creation, of building the business, and of working with him in a very complementary way, whether it's to pursue add-on acquisitions or evaluate financing alternatives or things of that nature. And also with the construction of a board, having peers who are industry experts with the ability to make a contribution to the evaluation of a strategic plan, and taking a step back from the business instead of working in it so deeply for so many years, had a chance to work on it and just think about what else they could sell their customers and how could they entrench and improve margins and just the fundamentals that lead to value creation over time. And I think that Tim asked himself really three questions that are pretty powerful and that I think every business owner should be asking themselves. And the questions are, do you even want to sell the entire company one day? Is that an objective that you want to plan for? Do you want to sell some now and achieve the rest of your liquidity later? And is it important to you that ownership remain with family members and/or your management team? Those questions are often deferred because they're too sensitive. They're often discussed within a family group or within whoever is the senior most advisor to the business, the accountant, the lawyer, an insurance advisor, a family net worth money manager, whoever it is who's engaging the business owner. And the theme, I think, behind these 3 points is do something, and do it when you don't have to do it. The company was doing well. He's in great health. He could have done nothing and continued to build it to support a lifestyle, but he wanted more, and he wanted to pursue a business that gave him and his new partners some alternatives with eventual growth plans and with eventual liquidity objectives and alternatives. But those 3 questions that he allowed himself to answer, however emotional it might be, because when you begin to answer these questions, you begin to say things like, should I be preparing this business for ownership transfer to the next generation? And is that the right thing to do? Is that the right thing to do for the children? Should it be some of them? Should it be all of them? And the challenging questions need to be raised, they need to be debated, they need to be thought about more and more. Most people build their business, like my grandfather and my father, to get around the corner, to support their lifestyle, to support their families. Tremendously noble undertakings that define the vast majority of smaller businesses in the country, I think. But to ask yourself, is there more? And to build your business very specifically so that one day it might be sold is actually a very rare but becoming more common, and I think quite sophisticated thing that more and more business owners need to think about, in part because it challenges you to address all of these issues. And it also challenges you to think about your business in a way that many people don't, and that's with a truly balanced perspective relating to not just proprietary strengths and unique growth opportunities, but admittedly, what are the limitations that face your business? And when those questions are asked, they're often answered first around the whole issue of succession and ownership, business transition, and how long do I want to be here? What do I need to do to create more value? What do I need to do to give myself some alternatives and options? And that's really what this is all about. So we subscribe to the following themes. I don't think they're controversial, and those are really what is successful succession planning all about, and what are some of the things that more business owners, I think, should be doing. And one is clearly building a business to sell it. The other, of course, is writing a strategic plan, thinking about your options in the marketplace. How do you build on those strengths? What else can you sell your customers? And very particularly, how through your actions can you mitigate your risks? Create an organizational chart of your company. Make yourself replaceable. Determine and inform your successor in a very careful, deliberate way, very often using outside advisors. Family coaches are a much more prevalent way to do it these days. And assemble an advisory team that can work with you to think through a number of these alternatives. I'm a chartered business valuator, and many of the people we meet, when we talk about the value of their business, they are completely understandably talking about their life's work. We're talking about their life. We're not just talking about numbers on a page. And it's important to be realistic, and it's important, I think, quite regularly to look at your business, examine all the normalization adjustments, think about what's going on in terms of purchase and sale transactions that are relevant in terms of value drivers, and come up with ultimately a realistic sense of what your business might be worth. For you may want to do nothing, but I think it's still an exercise that's an adjunct to the strategic plan, because no matter what the business owner might do, whether it's the estate freeze conversation, whether it's putting term debt on the balance sheet so that you could pull out one-time dividend safe income, or et cetera, things of that nature, it's going to come up. Transferring shares to family members, bringing on board additional senior management team to back you up. And if you do it right, I think ideally they should be owners and partners of yours and not just exclusively employees of yours, which means maybe you're going to create an employee share ownership plan or put in place some type of long-term incentive plan, or find industry executives who are looking to pursue their own entrepreneurial and ownership path. And one way or another, and more often, and increasingly, people are going to have to talk about value and come up with the basis on which they're prepared to engage, remunerate, and ultimately sell some stock to these other partners of theirs. Ultimately, this comes down to, if someone is interested in pursuing this scenario of mitigating risk, not being alone at their company anymore, and partnering to a certain extent with anyone, whether it's a couple of employees who you're prepared to let out some rope to, or whether it's a private equity group that you want to sell some of your business to. Ultimately, there's a few keys, I think, and a few things that the owner-operator needs to think more about. And people tend to think that, for example, the private equity group is the only party here that's doing due diligence. In fact, the owner-operator needs to do as much due diligence. You need to speak to the people who are on the boards of their other companies. You need to speak to the presidents of the companies and family members of businesses that they've invested in. You want to know who your partner is going to be. It's kind of like a marriage, because you're together for many years making tough decisions about those two things which are scarce, time and capital. And you have to share an objective. And ultimately, when we meet with people, I think that we do the thing that is still rare, and that's listen. What do they want to do? What's in their DNA? what are they sensitive about? And listening and exhibiting that empathy, I think, gets you at least into the stepping stone of what that relationship might look like. There's a lot of people who don't want a partner. There's a lot of people who've been doing their thing for so many years in their way, and they're not ready to let go, and they have no intention of selling the family asset one day, and that's perfectly fine. But other people, I think, need to, in the entire spectrum of thinking about managing risk, because that's really the theme here, and lowering exposure to the biggest and most illiquid asset that is represented by the family net worth, thinking about their alternatives. And too many people, I think, get bogged down in this discussion with private equity groups about every aspect of the shareholder agreement. People provide leadership and oversight and work together. Shareholder agreements are pieces of paper that should stay in a drawer. When they come out of a drawer, that's when you have a problem. But they belong, everything that is the contract of that relationship, from employee terms and conditions to major matters that you have to engage your partner in, to the formation of a board, to eventual paths to liquidity, to a wide variety of issues that all have to be negotiated and agreed on. Those are extremely important. But I think in the process, the private equity investor and the owner-operator need to step back and say, do I want to be in business with this person? Do I believe they can make a contribution? In many of the instances, there is the immediate interpretation when a professional investment group says we're going to form a board of directors, that equals stifling the entrepreneurial energy of the founder who's been doing his own thing, maybe with some counsel from a variety of sources, but perhaps not as formally as he's hearing it described in the context of forming a board. And I think people misinterpret that as a form of governance and oversight that's going to restrict the energy and enthusiasm of the operator to do what he's done maybe for decades prior. In fact, it's to complement that person. And I think that when boards are formed, the first thing outsiders who are joining should ask of their prospective partner is, who do you think should be on the board? Who could help you? Who could help you identify growth opportunities, open doors that maybe you've run into and haven't gone through? Who can help you find alternative sources of supply? Who can help you find the next VP sales? Who can help you find an add-on acquisition? And that's how boards should be formed. And this conversation about taking on a partner, I think, with that type of engagement, doesn't have to be a scary proposition. In fact, it should be, I think, a welcome proposition, just to force yourself to go through it, to answer the questions, to deliberate on such things as, what's our barrier to entry? What's our differentiation in the marketplace? It forces the owner-operator, I think, to get ready for these types of conversations, which are extremely healthy, even if they're some years in the future. And those issues are around actually coming up with a list of the risks, much like you'd see in a prospectus, and then there's an opportunity, of course, as management walks you through how they're going to address those risks through the execution of their plan. And so all of those things are elements that help the business owner, help all the constituents, family, stakeholders, employees, customers. I think they're extremely important issues to address, and they're very delicate sometimes, but they ultimately help the family owners and forces the family owners to address issues of transition and maybe sale, maybe partnership, but talking about it when you don't have to talk about it. Talking about it when you're healthy, when the business is doing well. And when you really don't want to talk about it and are uncomfortable talking about it, that's exactly what you should be doing. You should be talking about it with your family, with your partners, thinking about what you want to do. If you want to do nothing, that's fine. I think doing something and addressing these points and focusing the conversation leads to better succession planning and gives you more and more opportunities to consider. It's better for you, it's better for your families. Thank you.
So, Larry, Argosy Partners strengthen structure through capital and expertise. I think that probably is also in keeping. But I'd like to ask you a pointed question about risk in terms of how business owners, how they view risk, and I guess what words you might have or what thoughts you might have around how risk, how the owner views risk is sometimes an impediment, perhaps, to your ability to step in and to help them achieve a liquidity event.
I think some owners and many, I think, and it's completely understandable, take a rose-colored perspective of their business, and the reality is that almost everything costs more, everything takes longer, and there's going to be some bumps in the road. And the things that you have not achieved at your company, and the customer you lost, and the product you spent money on and didn't bring to market, the employee you hired to execute a part of your plan who you had to let go, what'd you learn? What can we learn from that? And how those realities get managed is really what the relationship is all about.
So just one other thought. If I'm an owner and I'm about to take millions of dollars off the table and I have today's low interest rate environment, why would I sell? Why would I take chips off the table when I can earn a great return? I know the business.
And maybe you don't sell. But the reality is, if you want to not be at your company alone, if you want to diversify the family net worth, if you want to mitigate your risk, and maybe if you want to kickstart growth, and maybe if you want to pursue certain things that you found yourself in the previous number of years shying away from, that in the decade before that, you just stood in the batter's box and swung, open a new office, develop a new product, etc., and you find yourself not doing the things that sustain growth. You find yourself getting comfortable with a stable organization. Not that there's anything the matter with that, but in some instances, the owner-operator who's looking to address that or looking to buy out their partner, one way or the other, they don't want to be alone at their business anymore, and this solves that issue. How they deploy their capital in a wide variety of other areas, including investing in alternative assets, is part of addressing that issue.
Right. Okay. Larry, thank you so much.
Thank you.